Good morning, everybody. It is Friday, June 20th, 2025. This is a Boardwalk and Beach Committee meeting. We're live in the City Hall Commissioners Room, second floor. I'd like to call this meeting to order at exactly 9 o'clock a.m. We're going to start off with roll call of our members. I am Stan Mills. I'm the chair. I don't have these in the right order, but Honey Fisher.
Yes, here.
Howard Menaker.
Present.
Brian Hancock.
Yep.
Steve Curson.
Here.
Jimmy Horty III.
Here.
Frank Cole.
Here.
Patricia Davis is absent. And former member Craig Thier has not been replaced when he stepped into the commissioner's role. So we are down to 8 people. And we have some invited guests, participants today, and we're going to wait and let them introduce themselves at each appropriate moment, if that's all right. And I want to remind everybody that we thank them for being here in person, members of the public. We don't have any, not yet. And thank you for watching virtually. For those in person, they will have an opportunity to have input as articulated in the bottom of the agenda. The support documents also that we have in front of us are also embedded in the agenda. And the state presentation will embed that afterwards. I will make a change in sequence, and I will notify you that in a couple minutes. Right now, we'd like to do the approval of the minutes for the meeting held on May 17th, 2024. Are there any changes to those minutes that need to be changed? Well, then I would entertain a motion and a second to approve those set of minutes.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Howard Menaker and a second by Jimmy Horty to approve the meeting minutes in front of us for May 17th, 2024. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those signify by yes by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? And those meeting minutes are approved unanimously. I don't have any correspondence, so we'll move right on. And here's when I wanted to announce the change in sequence. I'd really like to begin with new business and save the old business for later on after the new business is completed. So with that, we're going to move right on to the discussion of how to commemorate this history of the Rehoboth Beach Boardwalk. I put together just a few slides real quick. A lot of the pictures are courtesy of the Delaware Public Archives. And what I wanted to do is just very quickly remind everybody that we're here because of the boardwalk. And our boardwalk was originally built in 1873, which is the first year that the Camp Meeting Association formed in Rehoboth Beach. And since that time, we have had storm damage, and it's been destroyed or just damaged. And as a testament to the value of our boardwalk to the community, it's been rebuilt every time it's been destroyed. And a few slides here just show you some of the boardwalk. And the point of some of these also is to show you that the boardwalk has had different configurations, different footprints. It's been totally destroyed, semi-destroyed, but again, it's been rebuilt in different configurations. This is a photo of earlier, before the total reconstruction. If you look down to the right, top right corner here, you can see where the end of Rehoboth Avenue used to be all concrete, if you remember. Test your memories back then. Used to be, they used to hold dances up there and everything. And so that's gone. So again, the point is that there are now different configurations and different materials putting the boardwalk together. We want to move on to first item of new business, which is to review the July 15th, 2024 report on Rehoboth Beach Boardwalk historical designation information and recommendations from the Beach and Boardwalk Committee. This is embedded in your agenda, and with all the embedded documents, we don't want to spend a lot of time on them, but I did want to just read real quick the course of action recommended by this body. And this was, just for clarification, this was all done before I became interim chair. If you recall, it was when Jay Legree, former commissioner, was the chair of this committee. So that came from this committee prior to Stan Mills being up here. That's why I'm reading from the July 15th recommendations. After researching the options, the committee strongly recommends that the city pursue historical designation status for the boardwalk. There are 3 possible levels of historical designation. The detailed advantages and disadvantages, including costs, of each designation should be investigated. And Howard, I wonder if I could impose on you to maintain a list of disadvantages and advantages as we go through our process today, describing each of these historic designations, and kind of force us to address those, if you will. So that, did you want to add anything about, you were the author of this report, did you want to add anything?
The only thing I'd add is that if you go to the end of it, there was a recommendation that we at least initially pursue National Historic Place designation as opposed to National Historic Landmark, but we've got people here who know far more about this process than we do, so I think we're all anxious to hear, as you say, the advantages and disadvantages.
Sounds good. Thank you, Howard. Appreciate your input there. With that, let me flip my page here. With that, I want to review. This recommendations were brought in front of the commissioners. Jimmy, you were there. Thank you for being there and presenting to the commissioners. And the outcome of that meeting in front of the commissioners was a set of meeting objectives that the Board of Commissioners approved of moving forward, seeking to explore the prospect of historical designation for the Rehoboth Beach Boardwalk. And I thought Commissioner Bunky Markert's one statement was apropos. My expectation is that the committee will come back to the Board of Commissioners and say, go this way or go that way, or go 2 ways at the same time, who knows. With that, let's see, with that there are 3 types of historic designations, again, that were mentioned in the recommendations: the state level and also 2 at the federal level. And so what I would like to do is go ahead and delve into the first one, which is the state level historical marker program administered by the Delaware Public Archives. And this is a point where I'd like Rosemary and Kate to come up to the podium, if you would, and we'll get you introduced. And this will be a tag team presentation. I chose not to invite the Delaware Archives people because we have some experts here in doing that. And I thought between myself and them, we should be able to cover most bases. So Kate and Rosemary, would you like to come up to the podium, please? So again, I think a lot of us are probably aware of them visibly because we've got them in town. And I'm sure you recognize these ladies. They've been here many times in front of us for the VIA and the fishing pier and different things. On the left is Kate McKenzie, and on the right is Rosemary Petain, both of the VIA. So again, we're going to tag team this. And again, this is embedded in the agenda, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. But I highlighted some of the important things, and please jump in at any one point. I think the important thing about this historic markers program is that it's a partnership, as the yellow highlight says, between the Delaware Public Archives, state legislators, and local communities. Funding for each marker comes as a result of direct requests to members of General Assembly from interested individuals and organizations. So that's the most exciting part of this, is that we don't have to come up with money for it, that we have to smooth our state legislators to to be able to do that. And so later when we come to that marker that they, maybe you could tell us who sponsored it, and if you would. So our marker count in Rehoboth Beach proper, I got it wrong. It's 6 existing installed already, and 2 approved and pending, and we'll go through them just very quickly. Can you recite your 5 at all? This one is at the end of Rehoboth Avenue. So this was preceded, I think, the first one you all ever sponsored, right?
Right, we did the VIA building, that was in 2016.
There, right there.
And then we did the Children's Pier, fishing pier. Then we did the surf line. Then we did the library. And then we did the lighthouse in the circle. And
So we have all those. I just have them out at different sequence.
right,
And this one, while we're on this one, the surf safety line, it says the sponsor was Senator Ernie Lopez and Representative Pete Schwarzkopf. What was your relationship with them? Were you the one that approached them to sponsor these, or
Yes,
did the Delaware Archives approach them?
we approached both Ernie and Pete, and they sponsored all of the ones that we were able to.
All of them?
All of
Okay,
them.
okay.
They're good buddies. And we've already I've already talked to one of our state representatives that we might be asking them for something else
Or something else.
similar.
And is it true they covered all the costs? There was no out-of-pocket expenses for you?
Correct.
Now look, feel free to jump in if you have any questions. So those are the 6 existing ones, and I goofed on this one too. I got the sponsors backwards. The Poodle Beach marker on the left is actually sponsored by Frank Cooper, listed on the right, and the Rehoboth Beach marker on the right sponsored by Kathy, identified on the left of the page. Sorry about that. These are both waiting manufacturing and installation. I think the Rehoboth Beach marker is out in front of the Poodle Beach marker. Howard, are you working with Frank on?
Well, actually, I was going to ask you, has the State Archives approved the wording for both of these at this point?
I just contacted them, Victoria. I just contacted them this past week and waiting to hear from them because I just happened to check the application for the Rehoboth Beach Patrol marker, and it has wording in there about this brand new, in 1962 is a brand new building. Well, that building's all gone now, so I don't want any of that wording on the sign. So no, we're waiting and setting up a site visit for both of those, and I imagine at that time we'll look at the wording. Yeah. Now, Kate and Rosemary alerted me that there was a new design, and if you look at the old style, is on the left side. The children's fishing pier, and on the right side is the brand new design that they have come up with. So I don't know which design our Beach Patrol and Poodle Beach marker would have. So we'll just have to wait and see. The general criteria, again, is embedded in the agenda. Basically, it has to be a historical event, place, person, group, or institutions. And I thought this was important, that the applications for these blue markers must include a letter of support for the proposed historical marker from the property owner. And so for each marker anybody wants to place in the city of Rehoboth Beach, they have had to come to the city of Rehoboth Beach, and we have had to give approval. And that obviously is...
Mayor, can you go back a slide, please?
Yes. I think the middle bullet there is important, Howard. A proposed marker topic must have historical significance based on its influence, effect, or impact.
So I guess my question, and you may know, and this may apply to all of the levels that we're talking about, historical significance is clearly a key factor in all of these. But for instance, the library is not the original building of the library. The boardwalk we have today is not the original boardwalk. As we go through this morning, I think we need to know how much does that matter. So, you know, will they accept it? Will they consider it historical, even though what you actually see and feel today is not of historical background?
Yeah, you have any response to that? 'Cause it
Yes, we
seems
do.
that.
In
Go ahead.
fact, we're working on the project with the children's fishing pier, the possible reconstruction. And I checked with the archives just to make sure that we wouldn't be in conflict with what the writing is. And they said the event, it doesn't matter if we put a new fishing pier there, the event that we memorialized with the marker stays there. The library has a new building, it may be renovated, but the location and the significance of the library's historical placement in Rehoboth's history remains. So to answer your question, the marker stays. That's one of the reasons why they do the research for the historical significance.
Great, thank you.
Anybody? Members of the public, you're welcome to raise your hand and ask questions also. Let me go to the next slide there, just reference to criteria. And so I wanted to, if you would review, would you share with us the application process?
Sure.
Because it's been referred to as just an application process, and it seems very broad and seems very easy to be able to get some of these things. So if you could articulate your experiences.
Sure. I would like to just say the state, according to its website, has over 400 historical markers. And if you look at them, in the corner there'll be S, here in Sussex County, SC stands for Sussex County, and the number. So if you go to Kent or Newcastle, it would be NC or K with a number. So that's how they're logged. And it's true, they have to have some historical significance, but it could be an individual, a place of worship, an event that occurred there. If you look at all of the designations, they're everywhere and everything. Besides the ones that we officially have and that the Village Improvement Association had done the work for the marker, there are some other markers that I didn't know we had. The Methodist Church on Church Street now has a marker for its significance in our history. There is a marker by Silver Lake. And there is a marker by the Indian River Bay, or inlet. So they're all categorized or grouped with the Rehoboth Beach markers. But if I could, I just want to tell you how the VIA got into the role of the historical markers. Now, the VIA, for everybody who doesn't know, stands for Village Improvement Association. It was founded or started in 1909, not long after the beginning of Rehoboth campsite here. And when we celebrated our first 100 years in 2009, we put together all the things that we had done. And this was a time where women had no vote, but they were not powerless, because those women were residents, churchgoers, and they wanted to do just what the name says, improve the village that we live in. And boy, did they change things. But as typical, low-keyed, to the point where when we started going out to get funds for the VIA, people sometimes didn't even know where we were or what it meant. In fact, one legislator who's no longer with us said, Was that like the VFW? No. Anyhow, the VIA has done a lot of different things for the community. Did you know we were the first to start the benches, advocating for the lifeguards, putting the surf line was because the bathing suits were so heavy, and women especially had wool bathing suits. When they wanted to come back onto the shore, they had to get a rope to come back because the water and the weight of the bathing suit was so heavy. They wore long skirts and got them dirty, but there were so many mosquitoes, and they had an influential father who worked in Washington who got the CCC headquartered in Lewis, and they cleaned up all of the standing water in the little ponds and places where water would just stagnate, and essentially removed mosquitoes, because this was a terrible infestation in Rehoboth. During World War II, they collected money to buy a plane. They have sent monies to foreign countries, to our schools, nursing schools. We continue to do that today, and we're very proud of it. So that was the first 100 years. We had some very notable individuals who were presidents. One was our members was a mayor for 3 terms of Rehoboth. We have been fortunate to help develop the Sussex Garden Club, the Rehoboth Beach Art League, even the, I forgot. Anyways, we've done a lot of things, and I don't want to bore you, but the whole project of our pursuit in obtaining the marker was to make sure that the people that live and visit us know what kind of a community we are and what we wanted to do, and memorialize that in a plaque. So when I was president of VIA in 2016 to 2018, every president has to take on a community improvement project. And for me, it was very easy because I chose the Rehoboth Beach Library. I was a trustee on the board. And again, the VIA had started the library in 1912. And up until 1948, the VIA managed putting books in their cars or going to churches and making sure people had access to books. And then in 1948, the city gave us a space in the old school building and took over that portion of the library. Many of our presidents and members have been librarians. So the VIA was very close to the library. And so it was easy to contact the archive department, find out what we needed to do, get our history together, get our funding together, show that this is something that we needed to promote. And we had a commemorating grand opening where we had the marker with a cloth, and we zipped it off, and we had a party, and it was fun. And we did the same thing with the children's fishing pier and surf line. So there's a lot that the city can gain for it, but it's also important that we keep promoting, especially as leaders of our community, what this meant, because people before us have made this place what it is, and to memorialize that. Kate?
I just wanted to reiterate what Rosemary had said before, because when we were looking at the fishing pier and changing the fishing pier and reconstructing it, I too also contacted the archives. And as long as you have a structure there, no matter what it looks like compared to the first one, you still have that historical plaque and it's still viable. So I just wanted to reiterate that because it's a very important component.
Very good, thank you. What I wanted to do is go over what the application is, and it's embedded in the agenda. So, but it's very simple. It's 2 pages. Essentially, the first page is what's your preferred location, the reason the location was chosen, all your contact information. That's basically it on page 1. Page 2 is just 2 boxes. Statement of significance and background information. So it's very simple process. And then you all would have done that 5 times. Can you tell us how the wording was decided on these plaques? Did they give input or did you give input?
Let me say something before Rosemary talks about that. It's very important that you have documentation. One of the things that we continuously used when requesting any of these markers is that we have the 100th anniversary booklet that always went with those applications, talking about the data about the organization and encouraging the knowledge of everything that Rosemary has just said was, in this booklet. So what you have to send is not just what's on this paper, it's the background information that's also important.
All right, very good.
In terms of what's written on the marker, you have to, and the application, you have to document or show proof that the things that you're saying did exist or are accurate. But we could write what we thought we would like to have on that marker, but the estate has the right to change it, modify it, whatever.
And the length.
And the length.
Yeah,
So there's the opportunity, though, for you to initiate it.
You have a lot of input, but
Okay.
they have final say.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to share? Time-wise, any memory of the time from submittal of an application to them acting on it?
Actually, the first one that we did took the most time because we had to learn the process. After you get the information, make your contacts, have your funding people agreed that they can go, it did not take long. But the state has the final say on what it looks like, what it says, and it's also a part of the ceremony where it's unveiled to the public.
So,
Rosemary, I assume it was a little different for each one because the state either has a lot of applications or doesn't or whatever. But when you say it didn't take long, were they all done in a matter of months or weeks or?
Actually, for the ones that I was involved in, it took us about 6 months.
Okay, great.
But you have to have everything together.
Well, it sounds to me like even compiling a historic record through photographs and any written word, plus the application, seems very doable, and I guess I'm anticipating what the state's going to say because I suspect that maybe that's going to be a little more challenging, but.
Yeah, and when I reviewed all of the markers in the state, Sussex County has the least markers, the other 2 counties, because of their historical significance or whatever, they have more.
So Howard, you're keeping track of advantages and disadvantages for us, and I'm trying to think are there any disadvantages of this? I will share with you that this boardwalk committee, when I was chair 5, 6, 7 years ago, we had a discussion about the proliferation of blue markers. And frankly, we had a fear that in 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, you would walk the boardwalk and go blue, 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 blue marker and everything. So that was one concern. I don't think that's been realized at all. But are there any advantages or disadvantages? The advantage I can think of is this seems to be quick and easy. And of course, we can compare it to the other historic designations. And I can't think of any disadvantage that it's not going to impact your business on the boardwalk, Frank, or, yeah.
As far as I can tell, it is, as Rosemary and Kate said, it's a way of commemorating and remembering our history. And it doesn't come with a whole lot of, for instance, financial advantages or business advantages or anything else. But as you both said, when people come, we want them to know that this is a community with a rich history. And the markers illustrate that. So I think that's to me, at least, that's what the state program is all about.
If I may add one thing, it's really kind of interesting when somebody says, oh, you're involved with the VIA. I know all about, I read the fishing pier, I read the library, and it's gone like, people really are reading these things. And they're very avid to say, I know about this. So when you have people that are newly here, the people that have lived here for years, and just the visitors I'll give another example. When we help at the kiosk, the information booth on the boardwalk, and people will say, oh, VIA is here helping. I know all about you. And it's just like, really? Where are you from? Oh, Michigan, and it's just like, really? And they've actually read these plaques, and it's really exciting to know that.
So based on our agenda, some of the things that we're hoping to glean out of these three conversations about the blue markers, National Register, and National Historic Landmarks, we're hoping to learn or glean information about the overview of the program, identification of such designations, if any, in the city of Rehoboth Beach, which we've gone over, eligibility criteria, application process, costs and timeline, and benefits, disadvantages, restrictions, including potential effects on adjacent properties. So again, we hope to glean that from everybody. Is there anybody that wants to say anything? We'll have an opportunity at the end, after all three, to further comment.
And I guess my question for Rosemary and Kate would be, you indicated that the VIA has been active in, I guess, 6 of the markers, maybe the 2 pending ones, and then there were some who just sort of went off on their own. Would the VIA prefer to be involved if we go for this marker designation for the boardwalk? Would you prefer to be involved? Would you prefer to be told about it? What do you see as your involvement?
I'm sure that the VIA would be very open to cooperating in some way, but we would have to bring it to our board
Sure.
and make sure that they're okay with that.
Understood. Thank you.
Are you intimating that maybe our state legislators might be more enamored with them than us?
About that, but you've got a point. No, I mean, it's just that, they've been through the process. They understand the depth of the research that we need to submit, the sort of guidelines for what is written. Those are things we're all novices in. So your experience would be helpful. And I think the recommendation of the committee back in July of '24 was that we put together a group, including a representative of the VIA, for whichever course we pursue.
Right. So we might seek you out for further guidance. Anybody else up here want to say anything?
Yeah, I think one of the advantages, it doesn't appear to have any cost to the city.
Right.
Doing it this way. I haven't heard the other 2 plans yet, but this one is free to the city.
Oh, that's a big one, sure.
Definitely.
Anything? All right, Kate, thank you very much. Rosemary, we'll be in touch. We appreciate that. We're going to move on to the second of the 3 alternatives for seeking historic designation of the boardwalk. And the next has to do with the National Register of Historic Places. We've got folks from the state here. And again, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Suzanne?
Okay. Good morning. My name is Suzanne Savory, and I'm the Director of the Division of Historical and Cultural Affairs, as well as the State Historic Preservation Officer. I have 2 staff members with me. We have Gwen Davis, who is the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, and Emily Whaley, who is an architectural historian, and our National Register Coordinator. And I'll talk a little bit more about them in a minute. But just to give you a little bit of a high-level view of what the division does, we are a state agency within the Department of State. We own about 42 historic sites around the state, over 100 buildings, and we partner with many community organizations to operate them as historic resources open to the public. We also operate 6 museums in the area, in the state. The closest, we have the Zwannendale Museum in Lewis. We have the Fenwick Island Lighthouse. We operate the Zwannendale Museum. We work with the Friends of the Fenwick Island Lighthouse for them to operate that. So we do, some we operate, some we work with local partners. We also have a state museum collection in which we lend objects related to Delaware history. We place them in our museums, but we lend them out to other organizations, including the local museum here in Rehoboth. We have done that in the past as well. Our State Historic Preservation Office is a big component of what we do. You'll learn today about the Section 106 process that we have, and we'll also, the focus today is going to be on the National Register of Historic Places program, but we also have the Historic Preservation Tax Credit Program that we offer to historic structures and communities around the state. We have a research center for things related to Delaware history, prehistory, contemporary history. We, through that research center, we try to answer questions, help people do some of their research. And we are an agency that if you have a question about Delaware's history or prehistory, we'd like you to call us and we will help. And that's what we've sort of done today. You called and said, this is what we're thinking about and trying to explore and try to understand. And so we're here today to talk about some of those things, some of these topics that are important to the community. Emily is here today. She is going to talk about the National Register of Historic Places. She's the National Register Coordinator. She's going to look at the overview of the National Register and the landmark program as well. And then Gwen is an archaeologist, and she's going to share with you all a little bit about the Section 106 process that's part of the National Historic Preservation Act and talk about how that helps to determine eligibility for the National Register at times. So I think they're the experts in these 2 areas. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Emily first, and then we'll be available at the very end to answer any questions and to talk about particular items. I'm going to turn it over to Emily.
Thank you, Suzanne. Marco, they have their own slideshow, I think.
We do, yeah. Okay, very good. All right, well, thank you for that introduction, Suzanne. Like she said, my plan today is to talk a little bit about the National Register of Historic Places and the National Historic Landmark Program. But we're going to start with the National Register of Historic Places. So the National Register of Historic Places is the official list of districts, sites, buildings, structures, and objects significant in American history, architecture, archaeology, engineering, and culture. Nominating a historic property to the National Register of Historic Places is a multifaceted process that requires different levels of documentation. And so some of the benefits to listing in the National Register are the honorary designation nature of it. So that means that the property owners, it's an honorary designation. It's not like you have to allow people onto your property or have it open for tours for certain times throughout the year. This is often a concern with private property owners or people looking to place their homes in the National Register. And though it is an honorary designation, there are a variety of opportunities for participation in specific preservation incentives, such as preservation grants for planning and rehabilitation, potential eligibility in our state historic tax incentive program, like Suzanne mentioned, federal investment tax credits that are typically reserved for commercial properties, and potential building code adjustments. Additionally, when properties use federal funds or permits, consultation takes place to avoid adverse effects to historic properties, and Gwen will talk about that in a little bit. So you might be wondering how properties are evaluated for listing in the National Register. Usually we use three main areas for looking at how properties are evaluated, which include age, integrity, and significance. So age, let's start with that one. Is the property old enough to be considered historic? Typically, for the National Register program, a property should be at least 50 years old. In special cases, there are ways to nominate younger properties if they possess high levels of significance under criterion consideration G, but those are typically reserved for very special and specific instances. Next, we'll move on to integrity. So this is the question where you ask, does the property still retain its location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association? In other words, does the property look the way it did in the past when it was historically significant? And so let's talk a little bit more about integrity. So the National Register program defines integrity by those 7 broad categories that I just mentioned and that are on the screen here. These aspects of integrity ensure that all elements of place are considered in the eligibility process. While a property does not need to have high levels of integrity in each of these categories, its integrity should be relevant to its significance. In other words, if a property is significant for an event that took place there, its setting, its location are going to be extremely important to telling the story of the place. And it's also important to note that integrity is not conditioned. So you might have a property that's in pretty bad condition, but it still retains high levels of integrity. Likewise, you might have a building that is in really great condition. You might say, gosh, this is a wonderful building, but it might really retain low levels of integrity and it might not be compatible for the National Register program. So on the slide here, you'll see 3 different examples of buildings details from around the state of Delaware showing how integrity can be applied. Starting up in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see an apartment complex, and you can see where the setting is really critical to the significance of this property, as is the design. You see these really sharp, clean lines, the nice shadow work, and it really, when you're in the space, you understand what the architect was going for when they designed this. In the middle there, I guess on the left side, you can see some hatch marks and sawing lines where the materials, the workmanship, and the feeling are significant here. You can just tell that this is an old building from the 18th century, given that design of the configuration of those materials coming to form that corner of the building. And then in the lower image, you have a detail from a staircase, just highlighting design, feeling, and association with this building, speaking to its historic or planned historic significance. And so here's a fun visual exercise for you all to look at integrity. On the left-hand side of this duplex, you can see a building that's wrapped in vinyl. You can see where the windows have been replaced and they've pushed those fenestration openings in a bit. And on the right-hand side, you can see where this side of the duplex has retained its historic integrity. It still has its original cladding, like those really lovely fish scale siding elements over there. I don't think you can see my mouse, but like up in the upper gable, and then in the window detail. And it still has its wood surrounds. And so when we're looking at integrity, we want to see those original character-defining features, those things that tell the story of the building physically. So when we see this on the right-hand side, we can see, okay, this is how this was planned originally. This is the way it looked at a specific period in time in history. Whereas on the left side, we see something that's been greatly altered, and without that visual on the right side, we wouldn't know what the left side, what it would have looked like historically. So shifting into historic significance. Historic significance is the combination of research on the subject property and historic context information in order to explain why and how the property was important to our understanding of history. This often takes the form of answering research questions such as, when was the resource constructed? For whom was the resource constructed for? Who used this property historically? How is the property used today? And so I pulled a couple of images from Rehoboth for today's presentation. And on the left, you can see a historic aerial of downtown Rehoboth Beach. And on the right, you can see a portion of a Sanborn fire insurance map from Rehoboth Beach in 1922. And what's really great about using historic resources is we can, like these, we can use these to map out how the city changed over time, how it evolved, how it grew, where buildings were. We can date buildings using this way. So while this aerial is undated, if it was dated from like 1950, we could see like when things changed from the 20s to the 50s or vice versa, or look at an aerial and then compare it with an aerial from today to help us understand the evolution of the place over time. So after it's determined the property meets age and integrity requirements, the next step is to evaluate the property under the National Register's 4 criteria. So criterion A is for nominations that are associated with events and have made significant contributions to the broad patterns of our history. Criterion B is used for nominations that are associated with the lives or persons significant in our past, and this can usually be a tricky nomination argument to make, though it can be done. Criterion C is best used for buildings or structures that embody the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, or that represent the work of a master, or that possess high artistic value, or represent a significant or distinguishable entity whose components may lack individual distinction. In other words, this is for properties that have architectural merit. And lastly, we have criterion D, which is used for properties that have yielded or may be likely to yield information important to the pre-contact period or historic period. And this criterion is typically associated with archaeological sites, though it can be used for other types of structures, such as like dams or milling structures. And so there are a variety of different types of nominations, including individual nominations for single properties, historic districts for multiple properties, and multi-property nominations for multiple properties with a shared historic context. And all nomination types can be amended. Amendments to nominations may be made for many reasons. Some of the more common reasons for amending nominations include research changes, which could lead to changes in levels of significance, justification of a criteria, one of the 4 that I just mentioned there, changes to a property's name, area of significance, or maybe a boundary change for a historic district. And then starting on the left-hand side of the screen, we have Scott Amy Zion Church in Wilmington. This individual nomination was listed in the National Register in March of 2024. The middle image is a streetscape from the amended Milton Historic District, which was originally listed in the 1980s and amended in 2022 to include additional information and expand the boundaries. And then on the right-hand side, we have the Rockwood Historic Estate Historic District in Newcastle County. Rockwood was originally listed in the National Register as an individual nomination in 1976, and this is really interesting because it was amended in 2023 as a district to better encompass the variety of historic resources present on the property. And I point this out just to show that nominations aren't set in stone, that we're constantly learning about historic properties, and when something's listed, it doesn't necessarily mean that this is the history and it will never change. We're constantly researching properties, and as we find these important things that should be recorded in the nomination, we have that amendment process to help address those changes. So you might be wondering what the actual nomination process looks like. So it starts with my office, the State Historic Preservation Office, but I'd like to stop here and point out that anyone can write a National Register nomination. I work with a variety of different groups, including church groups, volunteers, private property owners, consultants, students, and just about anyone can write a nomination if they are willing to put in the hard work and dedication. It is a lengthy process, but everyone that I've worked with find it to be a very rewarding process, and I always find it to be rewarding too. I feel like I end up being like your biggest advocate when you end up writing a nomination. And it's a really wonderful and rewarding process. So once a property is evaluated and determined eligible for National Register eligibility, my office will work with the nomination preparer to draft a nomination schematic. This is an internal document in my office that serves as a planning document or a roadmap for the nomination. It outlines each of the 10 sections in the nomination, and we use it as an outline or like a planning document to help writing the nomination, to help that go seamless. And so part of the nomination includes drafting an architectural description, which captures the character-defining features of the nominated property. This is where we'll talk about those 7 aspects of integrity that I touched on earlier, and describe the way the property looked historically as the way it does today. Next, you will talk about the historic context of the nomination within Section 8 of the form. And this essentially builds an argument to support one or more of the 4 criteria of significance. This is where the nomination preparer will discuss the history of the property, and the historic context section of the nomination is usually the longest section. It requires the most in-depth research, but can also be the most fun because you get to discover the history of the property in different ways that maybe you hadn't considered before, using the National Register's areas of significance as like your guiding principles. And then, of course, each nomination will need clear photographs that depict all parts of the property. Figures are additional media that can be attached within the nomination. Figures can include, but are not limited to, historic maps, historic photographs, drawing charts, tables, and collages to help to give a visual representation of the history of the property. Once we have a final draft nomination, the nomination will go to the State Review Board for Historic Preservation. They will review the nomination. They typically meet about 3 times a year or so, and they will vote to recommend having it be moved forward, to have Suzanne sign the nomination, and send it to the National Park Service for final determination. Once that nomination has moved through that process, the National Park Service will review the nomination, usually within 45 days, and the final determination of whether it will be listed or not is made by the keeper of the National Register. So I also thought it would be nice.
I don't want to interrupt, but I've got a question that I'm afraid I'm going to forget.
Of course.
When it goes through both the state review process and the Department of Interior, do they always do a site visit? Do they always come see the property, or do they rely on what's been submitted in the nomination process?
No, so typically they don't do a site visit. Usually my office will do at least 1 site visit to the property, but once it gets to the National Park Service, once it gets to that level, they rely on the photographs that are submitted with the nomination. Of course. All right, so let's take a look at some of the listed properties that are in Rehoboth. On the left-hand side of your screen, you have the Women's Temperance Christian Union water fountain located on the boardwalk. This was listed in 2009 for social history. And then on the right, you have All Saints Episcopal Church located on Olive Avenue, and this was listed in 1991 for its architectural significance. So this kind of gives you an idea of just the variety of resources that are in your own backyard. All right, and now I'm going to transition a little bit and talk about the National Historic Landmarks Program. So I'm going to refer to this as NHLs for short. It's because National Historic Landmark is a mouthful. But NHLs come in a variety of forms, including buildings, sites, structures, and objects in districts. A historic site might be significant enough to receive designation as an NHL if it is located within the strongest association within a turning point or significant event in American history, is the best location to tell the story of an individual who played a significant role in history within the United States, is an exceptional representation of a particular building or engineering method, technique, or building type in the country, or provide the potential to yield new and innovative information about the past through archaeology. As of December 2024, there were just over 2,600 NHLs designated across the United States. In Delaware, we only have 14 National Historic Landmarks. We're currently working on a 15th, but that has been a years-long process. Additionally, there are no NHLs within the city of Rehoboth. But like I said, those 14 that we do have are scattered throughout the state. The photograph you see at the top here is of the Newcastle Historic District, which is the National Historic Landmark. And then the bottom photo is a photo of Christ Church near Laurel, which is the 15th that we are currently working on. But in order to be eligible for the NHL program, the property has to have significance at the national level and be the most significant property associated with its facet of history. And additionally, the National Historic Landmark staff have to have to provide more guidance up front within the nomination process. There's usually like a letter of inquiry that is sent to NHL staff, and then they review it and determine what path would be best for either moving forward with the NHL or not. And so I've got a slide here with additional information on the National Register and National Historic Landmarks programs. I'd be happy to share those links with you all. My email is at the end of this presentation, but we can send that out if you want to learn more about each of these. But thank you. And I'll turn it over to Gwen now.
Thank you, Emily.
So Emily had mentioned, so I'm Gwen Davis, I'm the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, and thank you for having us here today. Emily mentioned that one of the advantages of National Register listing is there's some protection from federally assisted undertakings. And specifically what we're talking about is Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. I will say you're talking about advantages and disadvantages. Some, if you're a property owner or a developer and you are working to get a project through and you're using federal funds or having a federal permit, you might see it as a bit of a disadvantage because it's a process that you have to go through. But we see it as, in the positive sense, of having some protection for historic properties. That's its intent. So what is Section 106? It is one tiny little paragraph within the whole National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. It applies only to projects with federal funding, permits, licenses, or other types of approvals from a federal agency. It requires that federal agencies and the applicants for federal assistance to take into account the effects of their undertakings on historic properties. And if you're interested, I have the link there to the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, which is the federal agency that writes the regulations that implement this act, or this section of the act. What does it mean to take into account the effects? It means that you have to try to avoid adverse effects, but it is a consultation process. It encourages but does not mandate a historic preservation outcome. It is the process that is regulated, not the outcome. All right, so this is a little bit of a busy slide that I stole from the Advisory Council's webpage. It is essentially laying out the steps that are involved in Section 106 review. It has essentially 4 steps. The federal agency, or more often it is the applicant for federal assistance, initiates consultation. They look to, determine, what is the, who needs to be at the table. There are certain entities that they have to invite to the consultation, including the SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, local government within whose jurisdiction the project is occurring, members of the other interested parties that might have a role or have concerns about the project and its effects on historic properties. And they also have to have a plan to invite the public to the consultation. Now, you can imagine that the scale of that public involvement can vary a lot. For a real small project, say DelDOT is replacing a culvert, it's probably going to be a pretty small effort that they go through with their process. For much larger projects, they will probably be more like specific public meetings. So that's the first step. And then the second step is to identify historic properties. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that specifically as it relates to your concern today. So when we talk about historic properties, the regulations have a very specific definition. It is a building, structure, district, object, or site that is either listed on the National Register of Historic Places or has been determined eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. Step 3 is that if They go through that process in consultation with all the folks I was just talking about. I should also mention that federally recognized Indian tribes are at the table, should they choose to be so, and other local groups, including state tribes, are often invited to that consultation. So in that consultation process, if they're found to be historic properties in the area of potential effect of the project, assess the effects. How is the project going to affect these properties? If there are adverse effects, then there's further consultation to see if they can revise the project to avoid that adverse effect, but if not, then what steps can be taken to either minimize or mitigate for that adverse effect. And I'm not going to spend lots more time on this whole thing, because we could do an hour just talking about the whole 106 process, and that's not what you wanted to hear today. So we're going to focus a little bit more on step 2, because it has more relevance to your concern here. So step 2 in identifying historic properties. As I mentioned, the federal agency or the applicant, usually they're using cultural resource consultants who are assisting them with this. They determine an area of potential effect that also depends on the nature of the project. The bigger it is or the taller it is, the wider the area of potential effects. And effects can include not just physical impacts, but also visual, audible effects, and changes to the setting and things like that. So what level of effort do they have to put in? Again, that varies with the nature of the project, but they are only required to make a reasonable and good faith effort to identify historic properties. So that means that they are not necessarily required, the federal agency and the applicant for federal assistance is not necessarily expected to turn over every single stone and do years and, or decades worth of research. Sometimes on big projects like 4-lane highways, it might do that, but they are only required to make a reasonable and good faith effort. And I say that because that means that when they're determining eligibility for a property, they're going to look at the available resources, but they may not be going into the same level of detail as would be required for listing a property on or nominating a property to be listed on the National Register. They consult with the SHPO, the tribes, other consulting parties, local governments, and as I said, involve the public to try and learn more, because often the folks in the local community know more about the area than the folks in wherever in DC or wherever the agency may be. So I want to talk specifically more about this step as it relates to the boardwalk, because as some of you may know, there was already an evaluation of the boardwalk under this process for the U.S. Wind project. And I'm not here to debate the relative merits of the U.S. Wind project. I'm only going to talk about how our office was involved in the Section 106 review process and what the outcome of that was. So in this case, in step 1, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, or BOEM, was the lead federal agency involved. The formal consultation, although U.S. Wind had reached out to us for background earlier than this, but the formal consultation started in 2022. BOEM invited over 90 entities in multiple states to participate in the Section 106 review consultation process, including federal, state, and local governments, SHPOs from Delaware, Maryland, I think Virginia, New Jersey. The city of Rehoboth Beach was invited, and other beach towns. Federal and state recognized Indian tribes and nonprofit organizations, and I believe the Association of Coastal Towns in Delaware may have been one of those. So they invited a whole bunch of people to the table to participate in the consultation process. They had their separate public engagement, and that was slightly different, but in terms of actually participating just in concerns of historic properties. Only a dozen or so invited that invitation to the consultation. In going through the process to identify historic properties, Their consultants conducted archaeological survey and also surveyed about 240 above-ground resources, I think in multiple states, right? And I'm looking to Emily because she was the one who reviewed the reports on the architecture when it came in. Their consultant did recommend the boardwalk as not eligible for listing in the National Register due to a lack of integrity, and they were documenting all the changes that had occurred over time, and especially most recently. To our knowledge, no consulting party of the member objected to this finding. Our office, I want to be transparent here, our office concurred with that determination in 2023. So what are the consequences of that decision? So this is what we call a consensus determination of eligibility. It means that for the purposes of the U.S. Wind project, this property, the boardwalk, was considered not eligible for listing in the National Register, so that U.S. Wind no longer had to be concerned with any effects that the project may have on the boardwalk. Now, there were some other properties that were considered to be adversely affected or potentially adversely affected, and there is a whole, so we went through that process of resolving adverse effects. There's a memorandum of agreement that was signed by our office and others that outlines steps that they still have to take with regard to minimizing or mitigating for effects on those sites, on those properties. So that determination is on record for future Section 106 reviews or other research. People are going to look at that information. But I will just mention that, we have determinations that were made many, many years ago that we do revisit when new information comes to light. I'm thinking about, even trying to think about some structures. So I know working with Federal Highways and DelDOT, there have been occasionally times when bridges were initially found not eligible for listing in the National Register, but then with the passage of time found that, okay, now this might be the only one left in the state that is of this type, and the determination changed. So kind of like the National Register, more information can come to light that could change that assessment. And I also just want to make it clear that a consensus determination for the purposes of a Section 106 review is not the same as a formal determination of eligibility by the keeper of the National Register of Historic Places. And backing up a little bit is that when they're going through this process, if obviously the agency, the federal agency, the applicant, and all of the folks at the table are trying to reach consensus on these findings and determinations. When it comes to eligibility, if there's not consensus, then that gets kicked to the keeper of the National Register of Historic Places for a final determination. So that's sort of a broad brush of Section 106 review. Again, it has an advantage for if it is a listed historic property or a property that has been found eligible for listing. It has some protections. If the highway wants to come through, I keep picking on DelDOT, but if there's other projects that are coming through that have federal assistance or permits, they have to stop and think about it. It doesn't say they can't do the project, but they have to stop and think about it. And often, or at least, I'd say a good portion of the time, there's some consideration of like, oh, well, maybe we can move this over here a little bit, or maybe we can put up some visual screening that would address the visual effects. So, I mean, it does, so listing and just being determined eligible for listing does have some benefits. The downside is that, of course, it doesn't necessarily protect everything. We get questions and concerns about Section 106 review all the time, both from folks who are concerned about why do we have to go through this regulatory process and the time that it can take with that. And then we have folks who are upset because, well, doesn't that mean that they can't do the project? It's like, no, that's not what that means. It's, as I said, it's a consultation process. So that's just a real quick overview of Section 106 and how it relates to the question at hand. So, that's all
I will just say that was a lot of information. I'm going to invite them all up, and we've shared a lot. There's one question. I'm sure there are others. So we're here to answer questions, respond, whatever, as you know, if there's something specific or if it's just off topic. Okay.
Well, thank you, Suzanne, and I understand that because you are the agencies that would have to act on this initially, then you're not really looking for questions from us on directly, will it pass the muster for all that? So they're not here to do that, but any other questions, members of the public or anybody, because they're going to leave shortly. And so if we have any questions, now's a good time. Steve, and then Jimmy, and then Howard. Steve?
I have a question for Emily. In your slide deck there, you had a visual of a plaque for oak something, maybe it was.
Owl's Nest.
Okay. It didn't have a whole lot of information on that as to the historical, source of it. I mean, is that a standard, what it standardly looks like?
Yeah, so once a property is listed in the National Register, you're not actually required to put up a plaque or any kind of marker denoting that that property is listed in the National Register. However, you can do that. Our office and the National Park Service do not maintain specific wording requirements for placing up or putting up plaques. They're usually bronze plaques, and there's a variety of different places that you can order them from, and each retailer has their own wording, level of information, the amount of information that you can put on the plaque.
Oh, okay.
But that's not something that we would, require you to do or say you must have like these specific key facts about the property you want. Most of them typically say this property was listed in the National Register in this year. They give the property name, the year of listing. Occasionally you'll see where the year when the property was also constructed will be on that plaque too.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Or you co-locate it with one of those blue marker signs. Jimmy?
Thanks. Just to tie into what Steve said, the Owl's Nest plaque is at Greenville Country Club.
Yes.
And they have, I've gone in there a lot, but they do have a really nice explanation of how, what, why, where, and when, and an incredible history of the property, a lot of photographs and everything else. And there's actually a hallway that you walk down that has like all the original blueprints and old historical photos and everything else. Just so it's a little bit more than just the plaque that's there. I think the club and, just based on the history that they received from the DuPonts, whose estate it was before it became the club, transferred that over. Ladies, thank you. That was a lot of information. It was very helpful for everything. I think the committee has learned a lot. The only question that I had, just clarification, you had said that the state historical, they did an assessment of the boardwalk based on would there be adverse effects on the wind energy site that is proposed for off-site. It was based on, I guess my question is, you were doing it for the offshore wind, or you were doing it, that's what I didn't understand.
Okay. So under Section 106, the federal agency and their applicant were required to try to identify historic properties.
Okay.
So they did their consultants did the research, produced an architectural survey report, which our office and others reviewed, commented on, and made and after, let's see, did it go through just one round of edits? Do you remember?
I think so.
Yeah, so yeah, we had comments on the report, but in the end, we had to tell the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management and the applicant whether we agreed or disagreed. Our role was only to concur or not concur with their finding. And in this case, we did concur. We did agree that they had made a compelling argument based on the lack of integrity that the property wasn't, that the boardwalk wasn't eligible for listing in the National Register.
Okay,
Does
so
that
it
help
was the
clarify?
applicant and the feds who made that determination?
Correct. And I should say, in all of the Section 106 process, the federal agency, they're required, the regulations tell them how they're supposed to follow this all out. In the end, they make the final decision.
Okay.
There can be some appeals with the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, which is the other federal agency that writes the regs. But ultimately, if the federal agency, they go through all of these steps, they make the final decision.
Correct. So I mean, basically, like if they came back and the state said, we feel that it is, they can overrule the state.
They could, but they'd have to go through a process
it.
of saying why.
Yeah, okay.
And as I said, if it came just to eligibility questions, things get more complicated when we're talking about arguing over whether something's adversely affected or not. But on eligibility questions, if they try to come to consensus, is like if someone disagrees, and we do occasionally disagree, then they sometimes will either do as we ask and do additional information, do additional survey, do additional research, or write the finding in a more clear way that makes their argument. Or if we can't come to agreement, then on an eligibility determination, it would go to the keeper of the National Register, and they would make the final decision.
No, and I think that information is very helpful. I think the other thing, based on, from what all three of you ladies had, shared with us, I think it's, we understood that the boardwalk has taken many, different shapes, materials, and everything else, and Mother Nature has kind of interfered with keeping originality there. But I think, that's good. At least we can kind of focus on, my understanding of it is we can focus on basically the location, because that's really been where it has been the whole time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jimmy. Howard?
Gwen, excuse me. Gwen, a couple of questions. So talking about the 106 process, so BOEM made the determination the boardwalk did not qualify. Has it happened in your experience that one agency will decide it qualifies and another agency decides that it doesn't? Or have they differed? So what I'm thinking of is, as I understand it, the Section 106 process kicks in at the moment that some federal agency proposes to do something. It doesn't come up organically. It has to be triggered by a proposal. So let's say BOEM has this decision on the record that it doesn't qualify. Let's assume 10 years from now FEMA has a project and they're going to make a determination. Do they generally follow a precedent of what the other agency has done, or are there sometimes differences of opinion?
There can be. I was trying to think of any example. So two different scenarios. So one, if there's, and in U.S. Wind, there is more than one federal agency at the table, but BOEM is the lead because they would be the ones basically approving the project. In cases when there's more than one federal agency, one is usually taking the lead, not always. It's a pain in the butt when they don't. But it's usually helpful for one, and it's usually the one that has the most authority over the undertaking that takes lead. I can't think of an example where there really has been a difference of opinion there, but again, there's that whole consultation process where you try to reach consensus. But the other situation you're talking about is like further down the line. So another, years later comes in, and they are doing a different project, and they are maybe they're doing something that's a little more directly impactful as opposed to, a couple miles away. That's just a visual impact as opposed to a physically impact. And this way, maybe they take a closer look. The first thing they're going to do is look at what previous determinations have been made, existing research. But they may, especially if we or some other, or the local government or another entity, another consulting party is saying, hey, look, you missed something. They missed something the first time around. Or it's been 30 years since this was done, and it deserves another look. More information has come to light. The materials are now 50 years old. Yes, so the decision can be revisited, and there are certain circumstances where it needs to be revisited. And there's times when we have been at the table and an agency has said, oh, see, 25 years ago, somebody said it wasn't eligible. It's like, well, it didn't meet the age criterion then. It does now, and it does need to have another look.
And then just to follow up on that, for each of you, Emily, what is usually the time frame from beginning the research to apply for registration as a historic place to actual granting? And same question, Gwen, for the 106 process. What kind of time frame are we talking about?
Sure. So that's really going to depend. I usually like to advise that to allow at least a year for the drafting of the nomination and getting it through the appropriate review boards. But that really depends on how long the nomination preparer takes to draft the nomination, and that can be in part due to the type of research needed for the nomination, if it's readily available, or if you are going through archives and literally going through the court records for the first time since they had been sealed and sent to archives, or what it might be. And then it also depends on scheduling. So the State Review Board, like I said, typically meets about 3 times a year. They would need the nomination at least 30 days prior to their meeting to review that. And then once it is approved by the State Review Board, those last minute edits are made as recommended by the State Review Board. It goes to the National Park Service, and they usually allow for a 45-day review period. So if that helps answer the question, but usually no less than a year.
Any other questions up here?
Well, he had the follow-up question about how long the Section 106 review process takes.
Oh,
Again,
yes.
that varies with the nature of the project. Some projects are initiated with our office and are resolved within a week. And others are, a former director of ours used to joke about the highway projects and said it's either seconds or decades. And because you can imagine, you've got that scale of the nature of the project. So the larger and more complex the project, the longer it is going to take. And it also depends on the level of effort that is necessary to identify historic properties. So it could be a very big project, but if it has been well surveyed fairly recently, and they're not impacting any area or very little area that hasn't been surveyed before, there may not be a need for a lot of new research and study or new archaeological site surveys. If they're, putting something very large and complex that has multiple different levels of approval at the federal level as well as the state and local level, it's going to take longer in general, because their whole process is going to take longer, and therefore their benchmarks for when they're going to get their cultural resource studies done and reviewed and allowing for so I think this was this, we had an issue with, not so much an issue, but we had a question to BOEM, because I think that initially they were giving us the report and had all Maryland's stuff in with our stuff. It's like, hey, can you separate this out for us? Because we're not going to review that part. And we have our standards and guidelines for what reports have to meet, and Maryland has their own. So so it can take a short amount of time, depending on the size of the project, the nature of the project, the nature of the resources that might be involved, and the level of effort that is necessary to identify historic properties.
Thank you. And Mayor, I have some questions that I think we need to discuss later, so I just want to reserve those so that we don't take up their time.
Yeah.
But I do want to come back to a couple of questions.
Yes, okay. Do you have any questions for them? I thought that I would wait. Okay, that's good. The next, we want to thank you very much. The next thing on our agenda is discuss other strategies to promote the history of Rehoboth Beach. Daniel, are you going to participate in there? Because I was hopeful because you're the one that suggested it. If you would come up, and then Gwen, Suzanne, and Emily, you can choose to stay through this and then leave, or leave now. And
Yeah.
stay, listen to Daniel, and then Daniel, we're going to get you in front of the microphone and introduce yourselves. You're with a different agency, and we'd like to.
Good morning. I'm Dan Parsons, Historic Preservation Planner for Sussex County. I've been working here about 17 years, and I help the county with Section 106 review for projects and community development projects, and then I do historic research. I help. So if you were going to do a nomination, if they were going to deem it eligible, I would be more than willing to help you with that process. But I was saying, if in the event that it's not eligible, there are other ways to I would suggest, I work with the Delaware 250 Committee, and we're giving out grants. I would suggest that you go through that process, maybe cooperate with Heidi and the Historic Society, and maybe undertake an oral history project on the town or the boardwalk. What I've noticed that every community on the beach has the same story about storms. I think, and going through county council minutes, I see all the storms that have hit the area over the years, and getting your recollections of the storms through the fire department, through emergency services, and that would be, and also through DelDOT. I work with DelDOT on projects, historic scenic byways, etc. And we just did an application for a project through the TAP, Transportation Alternative Program. I've got 6 kiosks to put in along a project route. So I think getting kiosks, QR codes, collecting information and working with the Historic Society, that would be my recommendation for immediate, documentation of what's here in the town. That would be my recommendation.
Very good. Any questions? Thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank
We
you. I did
appreciate
speak
you
with
coming.
Heidi. You would like to cooperate on a
input.
project, an oral history? Yeah. So we could get doing that pretty soon.
Well, good. We'll be talking about that in a few minutes. Emily, Gwen, and Suzanne, we thank you very much. If you would, I'll send you an email, but we'd like to receive that PowerPoint presentation as a PDF is fine, whatever's easier for you to send it to us. And we appreciate it. So we're going to move on to the next thing. I mentioned committee. The public's invited to comment also, but what I meant is it's not going to be the state participating in this conversation, and that conversation is to formulate final recommendations to the commissioners on a path forward to seeking one or more historic designations. As you recall, that's what the meeting objectives were all about. And so with that, I found this meeting to be very good. So getting the state and the county folks in, and I was not comfortable before with the initial July report saying form that committee, because if you looked at it, it gave the committee members, but it also said the committee could have anywhere from 0, well, actually, I think it was 0 boardwalk committee members. And so, huh?
I don't think that's what it said.
Well, that's how I may have misread it, but to me, regardless, I think.
Include members of this committee or whatever committee this.
Yeah, but I guess it was only a few from whatever. But I think we're at the point now where maybe we need this small group. And Daniel just offered, and Heidi, I'm going to ask Heidi to come up and tell us her resume. It's very exciting. And also, I guess we need to talk about it with respect to this committee. This committee, if we come to some conclusions today, then this committee is going to sunset. If you looked at the agenda item report, let me skip to that real quick, and then we'll come back to the historical designation. If you read the agenda item report, over the course of the past 2 years, commissioners investigated how to make the advisory committee structure more effective and efficient. Originally, they were going to sunset everybody and then just have one committee for everything. And we took almost a year to study that, and we turned that down. And so long story short, the result of the majority of commissioners, not everybody, is to start a new environment committee that would be comprised of the trees and green infrastructure and environment committees. And then we would sunset the boardwalk, animal issues, street and transportation, and combine those into a new public safety committee. So what that means, to be short about it, is that at one point, this committee will be sunset. And there's a certain process we have to go through. We actually have to meet 2 more times to sunset the meeting, to approve minutes and everything. So it's kind of crazy. But once we sunset it, then you all are out of a job. Then what we would be doing for the 2 new committees is putting a press release out, seeking new applications, submitting applications, and reviewing who to pick to populate those committees. So what I'm saying, I'm not quite, if we conclude all our business today, then our next meeting would be to sunset. So what I'm saying is, as we make a recommendation to the commissioners on where to go with seeking National Register or seeking the blue markers, it's going to be in their hands to designate who's going to do that. And so I've just covered, are there any questions about sunsetting committees? So I still need a majority of you to get together to do that. I will keep you informed on that. Do you want to finish the historical designation? And then we've got Henry here, and then we may, if everybody can stay till 11, I think we'll finish the business.
I guess my only question there is, as you say, we need another meeting to sunset the committee. Do you want that done like in the next month, or do you want that done in the next 6 months? What's your time frame on that?
Probably in the next month.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know it's a busy time for everybody. Literally, how it would work is, if we finish our business today, we would call another meeting, and we would, the only set of business would be to approve the minutes from today, vote to sunset the committee, we would adjourn, and then we would reconvene to approve minutes of that meeting, and then we adjourn and we're done, okay? It's just a crazy process, but there's a formal process. There is a method to the madness and everything. So if we can, let's see if we can finish this discussion on the historic, and then have Henry, and then I think we're accomplished our mission. We've been in business
Long time.
Can I suggest we do it the opposite way? Let's hear from Henry and Heidi, and then let's have our discussion.
That'd be
So we
fine.
have all the information.
That'd be fine. Henry, would you like to come up, and then we'll return to the historic designation?
Morning, all. So today I was going to talk to you some questions that were brought up and a few of the things about the boardwalk. Mike Peterman, the head of the Streets Department, he's on his way. He'll be here shortly. So if there's something that I can't answer and he can, he'll be glad to do so.
Where this stems from, of course, is the observations that were submitted. Some were with photographs that were passed on, and I don't know that he's going to be addressing that because I don't know that he's had enough time. But along with photographs, Brian, you and some others submitted written questions or comments or something, and that's what we've asked him to focus on, as well as some topics in the agenda. So sorry to interrupt, but go ahead.
Yeah, no
Henry.
problem, Mayor. So as you know, the Streets Department, they're the crew that pick up the trash, recycle, replace the boards, work on the boardwalk, do the beach rake, and in general, keep it cleaned up. So again, as I mentioned, Mike will be here in a few minutes, and if there's something that I'm not answer to, he will. A lot of the comments that the pictures that the mayor provided were from April or early May, and a lot of those items had been taken care of, such as garbage can placement, bike racks, signs, etc. And I did provide that list to Mike, and he was going through it also, taking a look at it and work on things that hadn't been done. So I'll talk about the mats for a minute. So this year we have 4 of the cocoa mats. So we had 2 last year, and we left the one out at the end of the season at Rehoboth Avenue. And we left that out all winter kind of as a test to see what would happen with it. And it went very well. So it held up well even through the rough winter that we had. So we purchased 2 more. So these were largely funded by a grant received, a $10,000 grant received last year from Representative Schwarzkopf. So what we did with that money, we bought. Mike and I were talking. We had read about these. We figured let's give them a try and see what happens. So I think we bought a beach wheelchair with the money and some of the cocoa mats. So they've been very well received, and they're less than half the price of the hard blue mats. People seem to really like them. For wheelchairs, they don't work as well because they're softer and the wheels can dig into the ground. That's feedback that we've received from several people. So with the mats, we start putting them out in April and we finish mid-May. They take a lot of time to put in. You want to put them in right, obviously, and they take a lot of maintenance. And we don't have our seasonals available until May, so we really can't support putting them all out much earlier because we also have the recycling and the leaf pickup until that time in May. So it's kind of a juggling act with it, but we do try to get them out early, and I think by May 10th or 15th, we had them all out this year. So in the list, there was comments about the foot showers. This year with the harsh winters, we had more problems than normal getting them fully operational and working. And they do fail from time to time. And, we have one person in the streets department and another in the building and grounds who's done some plumbing work. So we've been able, depending on the issue, to use for one of them to take care of the foot showers, which has helped defray some costs. We do not have a plumber on staff, so we have to call a local plumber if it's not something that they can take care of. So as far as beach patrol signage that was mentioned, we're putting, and it may be done today as a matter of fact, some more permanent signage on the beach patrol as far as showing direction to the men's and women's room. And we do that on, going to do that on both sides, both on the boardwalk side and on the Baltimore side. So it's hard to believe already, but the new beach patrol has been in operation 4 weeks already. God, it seems like we just had the ceremony, and it's been that was 4 weeks ago yesterday. So since opening, it's gone well. There are punch list items for sure. The general contractor and the construction manager firm are working on the items. In fact, I just was talking with the manager for EDIS, J.D. Bartlett, who's been here multiple times. I was on the phone with him a bunch this morning about some of the punch list items and change orders, which will be coming. And talking with Captain Giles, he's overall very pleased with the building. We've had minor issues, which, you have a project of this magnitude, you're going to have issues. It's how you deal with them is what matters. And we've worked through them, and we're going to continue to work through them. So, and also talking with Captain Giles, we have 9 beach wheelchairs this year, and that program has gone well. So about recycling. Last year, our numbers were pretty bad, like about 5 to 7%. Earlier this year, Mike Peterman, who just was able to come, and we brought a gentleman down from DENREC who talked to the crew about recycling, criteria for acceptance, different things like that. This has helped our numbers some, and Mike and his supervisors, they're involved more to try to get the numbers up, and so far we're at about 10%. So, you know, it doesn't sound that we want to get that much better, but it's still definitely higher than our numbers were last year. So BB&T is the contractor that cleans the public bathrooms, including Grove Park, and they're fully staffed starting this weekend through Labor Day. So they clean the restrooms, just the public restrooms at Delaware Avenue, Rehoboth, Baltimore, plus Grove Park. And as mentioned, they're fully staffed. They do not clean the second floor of the beach patrol. We're looking at what to do, and Captain Giles said a couple months ago, no, he'll have his lifeguards take care of that. So that's what we're doing this year on that. So another thing was talked about the access closed off by Laurel that DENREC worked on last July. I was hoping that they would work on it further before the season, but it doesn't happen. That's something I need to do. I need to reach out to DENREC further about that, about the plan and when that work will happen. Question was mentioned about the test boards on the boardwalk. If you all want them, you know, that are on the south side, if you all want them removed and replaced with our current boards, we can do that, but we need to wait into the fall till after the season to do that for obvious reasons. Question was about the fences on the west side of the boardwalk. That is the responsible of the property owners, not the not the city.
Henry, let me just mention, honey, I think you were the one that mentioned something about the white fence there. It's white vinyl. If you notice beyond the white vinyl fencing, all right here, there's the standard metal post and the wood slatting that's there. That is the typical fence specification there from DENREC, Department of Natural Resources. These folks installed it somehow, and DENREC is aware of it and has just let them keep it there. So it's not normal. Nobody else could ask to be able to do that.
They have to ask first to put it up?
Yeah, and you also asked a question about who owns that fence, the wood fence. I don't know who owns it. You know, if it gets bad, do we force the homeowner, property owner to put it in, or it's something I think we maintain. But again, for the plastic fence, it's not allowed, so nobody can ask for it anymore. I mean, they can ask, but they can't get it.
Okay, but they have to ask before they put it up?
Put the what, white fencing or
White fencing.
They have to ask, yes. These people asked and somehow got permission, but they're the only one, and it's unfortunate because it's installed right up against the fence or right up against the boardwalk. There's not even any buffer there, so that is an unfortunate exception.
Yeah.
Henry, go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Mayor. And last thing I have is that arrangements have been made with Clean Delaware for porta potty locations for July 4th weekend. They're very close to the same locations that we had last year. They're going to be installed the early morning of the fireworks on Saturday, July 5th. And the ones on the south side of town, basically from south of Laurel and not including the VFW, the American Legion, where we'll have 2. Those will be removed on Sunday, and the ones on the north side of town will be cleaned on Sunday and removed early Monday morning. So that's all I have, if there's any questions.
For Henry or
I have a question.
Steve, and then Sonny?
Question about the signage on the boardwalk. The entrances to the beach, some of the entrances have the sign about the no canopies, no tents, and some don't. Are we
Okay, I don't
addressing
know.
that?
We'll have to take a look at that. Let me write that down.
And just FYI, I think one of the photo comments to Henry was a picture of the rule signs with the map underneath. And we just didn't start it early enough. I don't know if you've ordered them or not, but at least for next summer, those map signs will add the new Beach Patrol building and the expanded public restrooms at Baltimore and the family restrooms at Baltimore and changing rooms there. So there's a lot of changes to make. Unfortunately, it'll probably be next year.
Yes, correct, Mayor.
Yeah. Any other questions for Henry? Henry?
I have a plumbing question, and maybe this is just me, but I see this all the time. That, I think I put in the report there that there are 3 buttons controlling which nozzle will be used. And you think the top one would be the top shower head. The second one would be the middle one and the bottom. Well, the only one, the bottom does control the feet, but the 2 at the top are reversed. And so people come up there and they think they're going to rinse off their shoulders, and the next thing you know, they're getting hit in the head because they hit the middle button. And I don't know whether that's something that is just, but they're all the same. It isn't, I think it was intentional, but people don't recognize, because it doesn't say this one controls here. I don't know, that's just a question I had about, can they be reversed, or should they, or should I just stay out of it?
Or at least labeled.
Or at least, yeah, how can you
Identify which one does what.
Yeah, I'm sure they could be. That'd be pretty expensive to take care of each one.
I don't know whether it's
Maybe
possible
to
when
put
we
some kind
order
of
new
signs.
Or just to reverse? I don't know.
Maybe when we order new ones, we make
Yeah.
inquiries. Can they?
Because they must have been designed that way.
It is pretty funny watching.
It is pretty funny. People go in there and oh, no, watch it.
Any other questions? Anybody of Henry or Brian?
Henry, there's still a boardwalk bench on the Star of the Sea private boardwalk. At some point, somebody's pulled it off the public boardwalk and situated it on the Star of the Sea, which is a liability issue for us.
So it's on the Star of the Sea
Yep.
property?
Yep, right in front of the jewelry store.
Okay.
Yep, thanks.
All right, we'll take a look at that.
Thanks.
Anybody else? If not, thank you. We appreciate you
Thanks
coming-
all. Thank you.
coming back. Thank you, Mike. So let's get back to the historical designation. I think formulate final recommendation. I think that's our last set of business essentially. And again, I think since we are sunsetting, we just tell the commissioners figure out what group you want to seek the blue marker sign for the boardwalk if we want to go that direction. And then secondly, assign another group to seek National Register of Historic Places. I didn't get that the National Historic Landmark would be something to focus on at all right now, especially because they mention it needed to be significant at a national level.
I will tell you that I'm not sure that the boardwalk would qualify as a landmark, but the only other landmark application that I've ever been a part of had about a 900-page report and took 4 years to be approved.
Oh.
So I would say, let's walk before we run, if we
National
even even if we decide to run for a landmark designation, but I don't
Landmark.
think we're going to qualify.
But the first step should be the National Register.
I think despite what BOEM may have said with respect to US Wind, because I think that was a completely different investigation of the historical value of the boardwalk, I think we would qualify, and Heidi, you may have an opinion on that. Yeah, I mean, the blue markers are very nice, and they are proliferating, you're right. But to put one more marker that just says this is the boardwalk and it's been here since 1873, it's nice, but I don't know that that does what we were talking about in terms of a really significant designation. The advantage, some of the advantages of historic designation with a historic place really don't apply to us. I mean, we're talking about tax advantages. If you're a private citizen, we're talking about possible alteration of building codes. We do that on our own, you know. So I think that it is really just sort of it heightens the level. And I would say we should pursue both, because I think the historical markers, as we were saying earlier, people really learn from those. And the designation for a historic place doesn't necessarily even carry all that history. So I think they both serve different purposes. And the recommendation that I look back on that we made in July of '24 was a group constituted of one representative of city staff, a representative of the Historical Society, a representative of BIA, and a member of the Beach and Boardwalk Committee, and then possibly a representative of the State Division of Historical Cultural Affairs, because they are going to have to make that application if we do. So that was the recommendation. I still think that's probably the way to go. I think that recommendation holds. It also occurs to me that the Historical Society has such a rich history of the boardwalk that our submitting that application for Register of Historic Places almost becomes an editing function more than it is a research function. I think we know the history of the boardwalk. I think the Historical Society has this, you know, has copious records.
In talking with the state, I'm not sure they would be amenable to being on this committee, because
I don't know.
they're the one making the decision.
Right, at some point they have to be involved, but maybe it's not this
But
committee.
as I understand from others, they're certainly there for guidance and everything. Heidi, we've been saving the best for last. Would you, would you let mind come up to the podium microphone and introduce yourself? I was excited to hear what your background is, and if you would share that with us. And
Hi, I'm Heidi Nastrom Evans. I'm the Executive Director of the Rehoboth Beach Historical Society, and thank you for inviting me here today. And I was honoring Mayor Mills' request that I hold my comments and recommendations until the end, and I was biting my lips because I had lots to ask about. But first, I was wondering why the Boardwalk Committee is being sunsetted, and if they're being replaced by the Environment Committee and the Public Safety Committee, who will then have the historic preservation of the boardwalk? Who will be, you know, thinking about that, since this committee actually seems to have come up with that concern?
well, again, that's a decision of the commissioners to sunset all the committees. So they all sunset. And only 2 get rebuilt. But in terms of who carries this forward, I think that's literally is going to be in the hands of the commissioners. And that's where I think the timing is right now, I think, to be able to either set up the committee or just designate that they do it. See, I'm hesitant to designate committees, because then you've got to take minutes and they've got to be open to the public. I would rather just say Heidi and Daniel and Kate and Rosemary and something, would you get together and work on this for us? I don't know if that's even possible, but
So, the commissioners, yeah.
yeah. Because they may want, they may want. We've got an ad hoc committee we can make, or a task force or something. Study group or something. It would still be a public body and still need minutes and all that stuff. So that's just my hesitation, that it creates more work rather than just a private group. If we can even do that, we may not be able to do that because of freedom of information. So I don't know that I answered your question, but it's going to have to be a different group that carries on the torch for historic designation.
Okay. Well, thanks for answering that question. And then regarding my recommendations for the 3 courses of action, actually 4 courses of action that we considered today, I think the VIA did a very good job of making a point of how helpful and useful the historic markers are, in that they are, there's history and bite-sized pieces out there for people to appreciate. And at the Historic Society and Museum, we are getting ready to open an exhibit called Celebrating African American Rehoboth, which looks at 3 centuries of African American history in Rehoboth Beach. It's a watershed exhibition, and one of the outcomes we hope that will come from it is getting a historic marker for the Crow's Nest, which is the name that the Black Beach had during segregation. So I'm a big advocate of historic markers. I've worked personally with Emily Whaley on a application and designation for a National Register of Historic Places nomination and application and award when I was working on a project for Prospect AME Church in Georgetown, which is the oldest African American church in Georgetown. And working with Emily is amazing. I mean, she is so good at what she does. And she provides a lot of guidance. It's a big undertaking, doing the historical research and getting everything together that's needed. But what you have afterwards is a history that is very in-depth and rich, that is available online. And as you mentioned, where there was the plaque for one of those awards, the place, the city can have that history available for people as well. But it is also available online. You just have to look them up, and then you have this, rich wealth of history that's been collected. Now, I was interested also in what Gwen Davis was saying about the Section 106, thinking about that wind project, for example. I know that there were many people that were concerned about the visual effects of the wind turbines, and just thinking about if you did have that protection of the landmark designation, you could claim that the visual integrity of the, I'm thinking of the boardwalk as a cultural landscape. It's existed there for, over a century, even though the architectural integrity is not the same as it was initially. It's played the same important social role in our community for all of this time. And so, that designation also seems to have merit, because if we ever want to protect the boardwalk from federal projects and the impact that they might have on our community, we would have that to fall back on. So those are my recommendations, and I really appreciate you involving me and the Historical Society in this process. Dan Parsons mentioned wanting to do an oral history, which we would love to be involved with. We have a very important oral history library at the Historical Society, and when our new exhibit opens on the 27th, you'll see that in that exhibit, we have oral history listening stations. So we have 5 different topics where we've brought together a variety of oral histories on particular topics, like education, for example, or the beach. And so we would really like to be involved with that.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Thank you. Anything more you'd like to add, or no? So the easiest thing is we just resubmit this report essentially and say we recommend seeking a blue marker from the Delaware Archives and seeking path forward in seeking a National Register of Historic Places, and leave it up to the new commission to come up with how they do it and whether they have a committee or not. It may be FOIA dictates a committee.
I think at the very least, I think at the very least, we could make some suggestions, for instance, that the VIA be involved. I don't want to leave it completely open, because then the questions that we've all considered get raised all over again. And so, maybe we can say, one of the possibilities or among options would be to involve the VIA and the Historical Society along with city representatives, or something vague like that. That you're right, the commissioners are going to have to make a decision who pursues it. Well, but I don't want to leave it as a blank slate.
No, and that sounds good. And maybe we've gotten offers from Heidi, from Daniel, with the Sussex County and the VIA, if you're willing to sit on help. So that would be at least 3 groups we say have offered to participate. Are you, Rosemary, are you or Kate, or are you willing to offer somebody else in your group? Yeah, okay. So possible.
So, Mayor, do you want us to update this document? You had talked about recording advantages and disadvantages and all that, some of which are here, but some of which are not. Do you want us to update this and then end with the recommendation, as you say, to pursue the 2 paths?
I would, so that we have a final report from this committee.
All right.
And unfortunately, the burden.
I saw that coming.
It'll go to you.
That's okay. I'll submit it back to you for approval, and then we can distribute it.
I think it can be generally fairly brief.
Yeah, I don't think.
But maybe including one sentence on why are we not seeking the NHL thing, and because it's not of national significance, that it would warrant it.
Put it together.
So is everybody okay with that? We're not going to vote on it. I think that's the consensus, is we will update the report to reflect our conversation. And committee member comments, anything from committee members? Set next meeting. I'll go through Patricia, I guess, to set next meeting. Is that right? And again, all I need is a quorum for the next meeting, because it'll be approving minutes of this meeting, and then adjourning and reconvening to sunset the committee, and as I explained before.
Would we have to, so Howard will send you the report, then you'll circulate to the committee? I mean, my question is getting to, do we have to approve it in our next meeting to submit, and then I know we'll end that next meeting and then sunset us? So, I mean, don't we have to have in a meeting, yes, the committee's reviewed this report like we did a year ago, or?
I think we can, because it's just an update.
We're editing,
it's
right,
just an
right.
update. I think we can distribute it to everybody
Okay,
on an individual basis, and just the responses that you find some corrections.
okay. So we'll
or
have that
something.
done before the meeting so we can approve it as a part of the meeting minutes.
All right,
and
is that all right?
Yeah, it could be done individually, but when the response comes back, do not reply all.
Correct, yeah.
All righty.
So Mayor, I'm sorry, you want me to send you an edited version of this, send it to you and Patricia then? And then
Yeah.
The two of you will decide how
And
you
then I'll have-
distribute it and get comment back.
Yeah, let us have the initial just review to correct grammar or something. And then I'll have her distribute it to everybody. Is that all right?
Yeah.
And so this is one of our next to last things. It's been a long, long time. I was on the original Boardwalk Committee probably back in 2006, 8, probably 2006 when we first started and everything. So set next meeting date to be determined. Citizen comment off topic. Anything else, Heidi? Thank you for coming. We appreciate your offer to work with us. With that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting at